Move over to the pass catchers for love-hate here. Drake London tops the list. We got to hear from Drake London this week on the Falcons' impressive wins against division rivals early in this season.
Did he say bird up? He promised he would say bird up.
Wait and see.
Oh no, it's amazing, and we got to go out there and try to win that game. It's a needed situation right now, so go to Tampa, handle business, and not to say that we'll be set, but it's definitely will look bright for us after that.
Close game against Tampa the last time. What was the biggest takeaway from facing them from a receiver standpoint?
Just doing my job. That's pretty much it. Just finding open zones, beating man coverage, whatever it has to be in order to get the job done. I think that's just the sole focus this week.
Bird up.
Bird up, Drake London.
Bird up. He didn't say it, but he will.
Drake London will say it this week because he's got the Bucs. They're allowing the third most yards per game to the slot. Detective Drake, Matthew, is having a hell of a time playing more slot snaps this season.
Yeah, since week 3, 60% of his targets have come in the slot to Detective Drake London as well. By the way, no player has a higher red zone target share than Drake London this year. 48% was what he has. And why do I mention how much work he gets in the red zone? Because the Buccaneers have allowed at least one touchdown to a wide receiver in every game this year. And so you're saying to me, all right, pretty likely that a wide receiver scores a touchdown against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because they've given up at least one in every game this year. Who's most likely to get that touchdown? It's Detective Drake London. He's a top 5 play for me this week.
Yeah, he had over 100 yards from the slot alone when they played Tampa Bay last time out. And this Bucs secondary there's just nothing there. Like, they just have no prayer.
They've had injuries, they've had underperformances, and quite frankly, Todd Bowles is usually great coaching the secondary. It's been dreadful this year. Yep. They have no answer right now. Baker Mayfield is just dropping back 50 times a week trying to find a way to keep them in games.
Antoine Winfield is back, and he wasn't playing in that previous game against the Falcons. But still, Antoine Winfield was out there against the Ravens, didn't make any difference.
Yeah.
And, which is good times because you have Baker Mayfield, right? Because he traded you, Baker Mayfield.
For Cooper Kupp, just won him straight up.
And you're playing me this week.
I don't know what team Cooper Kupp's going to be playing on next week.
Could be great for you.
Could be great for you?
Yeah, could be. I was kind of hoping the Chiefs would get him, but I think that
that ship sailed.
Yeah, it's been nuked, so
to speak. NFL insider Chad Ochocinco says he said the Buccaneers. He suggested 2 teams. He said the Buccaneers and who's the other team that he suggested? I forget. But he put it out there because he actually had Devontae Adams to the Jets before anyone else.
So he started half of America.
No, I know. Well, but he sort of reported it officially. I don't know. Listen, Chad knows a lot of. Chad's still very close with a lot of players in the league, obviously. So
he definitely is.
He said he's definitely going, and he tweeted it out there. It's something like it was like the Buccaneers and I think the 49ers were the 2 teams that he threw out there. So we could see. Feels like I feel like
Deebo Samuel play in the slot.
Yeah, it feels like the Buccaneers are more realistic, given that they just lost Chris Godwin, and I can't imagine the Niners wanting to trade.
It's a weird one.
Cooper Kupp within the division. Just have him torture you
the Bucs
like
much
twice
better
a week.
than the Rams at this point with all their injuries. That doesn't really seem like a massive upgrade.
No, but I think that if you're the Buccaneers, you sort of feel like, again, we're going to get Mike Evans back in a couple weeks. Like, you've got an opportunity this year. Like, the team's playing really well. Baker's playing at a high level. Again, you don't know how much longer you're going to have. Godwin's a free agent at the end of this year. Evans signed the extension, but like they have a window right here, right? And so, hey, we get Cooper Kupp to play the slot. We develop our younger players. We got this 3-headed monster at running back. Our defense hopefully gets healthier. Mike Evans comes back in 2 weeks. We don't think the NFC South is like that impossible a division to win. It's really just us and the Falcons. Right. So I think if you're the Buccaneers, it makes sense to, again, I don't know if you want to give up a 2, but maybe, I don't know, if you think you got a shot.
Hard.
Yeah, but hey, tell you what, we'll give you a 3. We'll eat some of the contract. We'll give you a conditional 2. I don't know.
Certainly doesn't feel like he's going to be on the Rams.
No. Stephon Diggs is our next player on the love list here. Jay comes in as wide receiver 15 for Matthew. It's as simple as this. Since Nico Collins has been out, Diggs has a 28% target share in those 2 games.
Yep, he gets a very favorable matchup against an opponent who he scored against back when they played the first time around. Now, the good thing is that they can't throw the ball any less than they're currently throwing it. So presumably they will throw the ball more. I think Stephon Diggs has established himself as the clear number 1 guy in the passing game without Nico Collins. It's just that how much are they going to turn the passing dial up? And you worry a little bit about the fact that they were so successful in the previous matchup running with Joe Mixon. But Diggs, I think he's must start. He's a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, by the way, and again, we talked about that previous game against the Colts again where Diggs scored twice. It was just absolutely awesome. No team has allowed more touchdowns to the slot than the Indianapolis Colts. 55% of Diggs' routes. Diggsy comes from the slot. So, as you mentioned, he's a top 15 play for me this week.
Jayden Reed next up, right behind him at wide receiver 16. We talk about this Jacksonville secondary all the time. Over the past 4 weeks, they're allowing the third most fantasy points per game to wide receivers.
I don't know if you're sensing a theme here, but, Drake London plays a lot in the slot. Stephon Diggs plays a lot in the slot. Where does Jayden Reed play? A lot.
Slot merchants.
In the slot merchants. I'm still looking for my house band, the slot merchants. I need somebody to step up. Give me a local Connecticut band that wants to be the slot merchants. But one of the reasons why we think slot merchants are going to eat this week and continue to eat, and Jayden Reed is one of them, the Jaguars have allowed at least one touchdown to the slot in 5 straight games, right? They've allowed the second most yards after the catch to opposing wide receivers, and Jayden Reed is top 5 among wide receivers in terms of yards after the catch per reception. Jordan Love is playing at a very high level. Maybe a heads up, a little foreshadowing about who might be on the love list when we get to quarterbacks. Anyway, Jayden Reed, again, easy top 20 play. I know it's a little bit of mix and match because they got the 4 guys out there, but feels like Jayden Reed. I think Jayden Reed's the most talented of the 4.
I would agree.
I think he's the most talented of the 4, and he plays the slot. So it's really like Watson and Dobbs and Wicks on the outside that sort of rotate in and out, and it feels like Reed's role is the most secure of the 4 guys.
Yeah, the beauty of Reed is he's a unicorn in the fact that he plays the slot, but then he's also an explosive deep guy as well, out of the slot. So it's been a little bit underwhelming the past 2 weeks for Reed. I think that's just the nature of this offense. It's just sometimes the matchups are going to be more favorable elsewhere. But he did hurt his ankle against Arizona a couple of weeks ago. I suspect that he may have been getting over that, and so hopefully he's healthier now. And yeah, he's the most talented guy, and I think he'll get the most opportunity.
David Njoku is the tight end on the love list here. He is tight end 2 for Matthew this week. Jay, talk about it. You can't run on the Ravens, but you could throw on them. Baltimore is allowing the second most yards per game to tight ends.
Yeah, look at what Cade Otton was able to do to Baltimore on Monday night. David Njoku is the number 1 option in an NFL passing offense, and he did seem to have something of a connection with Jameis. He was able to catch the touchdown pass at the end from Jameis. He looks fully healthy. What was ailing him in the first month of the season seems recovered from that. So David Njoku is a locked-in, must-start tight end for now, Matthew.
Yeah, he had 14 targets, to your point about the connection with Winston. He had 14 targets in Week 7. That led all tight ends. And, in fact, over the past 2 weeks, a 29.6% target share for David Njoku. So a massive amount of volume going against the Ravens, and three of the four tight ends that have seen at least 7 targets against Baltimore so far this year have scored at least 15 fantasy points. So David Njoku, whose game day outfits are second to none, is my number 2 tight end. I'm still thinking about that outfit. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Can you imagine if you came in with that?
With just wearing all that?
Yeah.
Just wearing that?
Yeah, on Sunday morning.
See, I would love to. The problem is that I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, I know. Well, you just, yeah. I mean, you guys look at me and you're like, look at how virile Matthew is. What a man Matthew is. But I got to be honest with you. If I stood next to David Njoku wearing the same outfit, like, you'd see that, I'm merely human.
Yes.
I'm not.
That's what it would take. That's fair.
I'm not built it like David Njoku. I just want to be honest out there to, all the people watching who might be wondering, exactly what's going on underneath here. Like,
Sorry, anyone, for conjuring those images
thank you, Jay.
as you watch.
It's great to have you back.
On a Thursday afternoon, perhaps with your children. Not anymore, though.
No, my poor wife is contractually obligated, legally required.
Absolutely.
She's legally required to deal with it. No one else should have to.
Some others receiving votes. Devontae Smith against the Bengals. Jackson Smith-Njigba against the Bills. They both come in as top 25 wide receivers. Jawan Jennings against the Cowboys, wide receiver 29. Cedric Tillman.
Yep.
Top 50 play against those Ravens.
Yeah,
Must be great to be starting him against Matthew this week.
It's going to be annoying when you use Cedric Tillman to beat
Can't wait for the text thread just melting and imploding.
In the League of Assholes. As I said, I bought a bunch of burner phones so I can just blow up your phone left and right, Connor. But look, we talked about Devontae Smith yesterday. Keep it open and close it out again. Like, I know he had the bad week last week, but they only attempted 15 passes. Since week 3, though, he gets right. I think Smith gets back off the schneid against the Bengals. Since week 3, Cincinnati allows the 8th most yards per game to opposing wide receivers. You mentioned JSN. DK Metcalf is week to week with that MCL sprain, so JSN should get a bunch more targets. And in the 4 games where he's gotten at least 7 targets this year, he's averaging 15.1 fantasy points per game. He's a top 25 play for me this week. Jawan Jennings, you mentioned that again. Injury opportunity here with no Brandon Ayuk. We'll see about Deebo Samuel. But over the past 4 weeks, the Cowboys allow the 3rd most yards per game to opposing wide receivers. and he's had at least one end zone target in 4 of his last 5 games. Juwan Jennings has. So I think there's a chance that he scores. He's a top 30 play for me this week. You mentioned Cedric Tillman. Again, we've talked about that Ravens game a decent amount. You're going to have to, they're 9-point underdogs. They're going to have to throw. Baltimore bottom 3 in terms of most fantasy points and yards allowed to opposing wide receivers despite how good they are. And Cade Otton, again, no Evans or Godwin. So Cade Otton, very quietly since week 3, is the 3rd best tight end in fantasy football. He's had a 20% target share over that stretch, and I expect that to continue with no Godwin. Over 12 fantasy points per game in games in which he gets at least 6 targets this year.
Yep. Connor, on Devontae Smith, is there something wrong with Jalen Hurts? Because it feels like Jalen Hurts at the moment is just either running the ball or throwing go balls to A.J. Brown, and there's just nothing really in between.
He has totally regressed as a passer, and it's the passing in rhythm with timing, intermediate passing, the lack of confidence throwing. There's just no other way around it. He's gotten worse.
It feels like there's a lot of stuff on film, particularly from the Giants game and the Cleveland game as well, where like he's seeing a guy open and he's just not throwing.
Hesitating.
It. There's just hesitation. It seems like there's something off.
I don't think he trusts Sirianni's offense, and I think that's been an issue for 2 years now.
Yeah. And Devontae Smith, he is the guy who really suffers from that. Because A.J. Brown's always going to be, Hurts is always going to feel fine chucking it deep to A.J. Brown one-on-one. Like, that's not going away, and A.J. Brown will come down with that a lot. And fantasy-wise, it doesn't really matter because Jalen Hurts is still going to run the ball. He's still going to get his rushing touchdowns. He's going to get the deep passing touchdowns. But I do worry a bit about Devontae Smith.
Because they run the ball so effectively with Saquon Barkley as well, and Goddard gets mixed in there as well. But I do think this week he has a nice game against the Bengals.
We hinted at this earlier on the hate list, but Deontay Johnson is our first wide receiver. He's wide receiver 32 for you, Matthew. It's as simple as this. Bryce Young has started 2 games this year with Deontay Johnson. In those games, he's averaged 4.2 points per game.
Yeah, is that good? Because I don't think that's good. He's had under 20 yards in both of those games, right? He had a 54% catch rate in both of those games. And now you got to face the Broncos and Patrick Surtain. Again, assuming he clears the concussion protocol, he did practice in full on Wednesday. Surtain is expected to shadow Deontay Johnson, and the Broncos overall allow the 2nd fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. They allow a touchdown on a league low 1.6% of wide receiver targets this year. As you mentioned, he's outside my top 30 this week. There's not a lot of things he can point to other than just his pure talent that makes you excited about starting him this week.
Yep. My favorite awards bet at the moment, Patrick Surtain is 30-1 to win Defensive Player of the Year. I think everyone kind of forgot about him because he missed this game and a half, but I mean, it's a fairly weak field. It's not like TJ Watt was racking up sacks while Surtain was out. Surtain comes back. You know, they're probably going to beat the Panthers, go to 5-3. They have an elite defense. He's regarded as the best corner in football. I think he has a path to winning that award.
I like that a lot.
Especially if they sneak into the playoffs, which is...
if they get to 5-3, they're a real chance.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Our next pass catcher, Michael Pittman, Jay, listen to this. Weekly finishes and Anthony Richardson starts. He's started 4 times with him. Wide receiver 53, wide receiver 51, wide receiver 46, wide receiver 30.
Wow, that's the best. That's the best start he's had. He's barely a top 30 wide receiver. Like the top of his starts with Anthony Richardson under center is a barely borderline top 30 wide receiver. He's caught only 57% of his targets from Richardson this year, Connor, which that strikes me as bad. Strikes me as not good.
Bad ball placement.
It's not like Pittman's running 50 yards down the field either.
No, this is a mess.
This is a tough matchup against the Texans, who allow the 5th lowest catch rate to wide receivers to begin with. So, yeah, outside my top 35 this week, Michael Pittman.
I think with Richardson now, like everyone on the Colts, outside of if you have to start Richardson as QB2 or Jonathan Taylor, I don't think anyone is.
It's sunk Josh Downs.
It's killed Josh Downs, yeah.
Josh Downs looks like a top 20 wide receiver in fantasy with Joe Flacco.
I see him just complete 60% of his passes in an NFL game. And I get that he's young and he's barely played, I'm not sure if he's even played 10 games in the NFL, but I mean, until we see that it gets better, I don't think any of these wide receivers can be started.
He hasn't played 10 games in the NFL, and he was considered a developmental project when he came into the NFL. I think everyone was so excited about him in the preseason because of the rushing upside, and that just hasn't been there fantasy-wise for Richardson this year as well. So either way, regardless of what you're going to do with Anthony Richardson, Michael Pittman is somebody who I think is a shaky start this week again, outside my top 35 in Week 8.
Christian Kirk outside the top 40s, wide receiver 41 against the Packers here, Jay. Since Evan Ingram's been back, his target share has gone down from 21% to 16.4%.
Yeah, and the appeal of Kirk is that he's supposed to be high floor, that he plays in the slot and he gets all these targets. But now this offense, which, by the way, the offense has not been great all season, but Trevor Lawrence hasn't been terrible. I think he's just been getting unlucky to an extent, seemed to turn it around a little bit in London against the Patriots. Like, this offense is Brian Thomas and Evan Ingram in the passing game.
That's the point. Both those guys have been able to be productive when they're out there, Thomas and Ingram.
Yep.
But to your point, sorry, Jay, you're right. It just hasn't been there for Christian Kirk, especially, by the way, since Evan Ingram, who runs a lot of routes in the middle of the field, a lot of the same area of the field that Christian Kirk does, since Evan Ingram returned. He's got just a 16.4% target share compared with 21% on the season. So he's getting less targets with Ingram healthy over those last 2 games. And in the 3 weeks that Ingram has been active for the Jaguars, Christian Kirk has not finished as a top 45 wide receiver. Oh, by the way, as we talk about the slot merchants, Christian Kirk not really one. We don't expect him to be this one against the Packers. Green Bay has allowed one touchdown to the slot this entire year. So feels like if you're looking for production from the Jaguars, it's going to be Brian Thomas Jr., be ETN, Evan Ingram, but Christian Kirk outside my top 40 in Week 8.
Our final pass catcher, Pat Freiermuth, he's got 3 straight games with a target share below 15%, Matthew. Even his big play against the Jets was probably the catch of his life. He's not consistent right now.
He hasn't gotten an end zone target this entire year.
Yeah.
Like when they get in close, they're just not looking for him as well. And by the way, for all the things that your beloved New York Giants do poorly, Jay, they actually defend the tight end fairly well over the last 4 weeks. They're allowing the 3rd fewest fantasy points to opposing tight ends. They have yet to allow a touchdown this season to an opposing tight end. So the G-men playing the position tough. Freiermuth outside my top 15 for the week.
Yeah.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.